This is episode 8, and actually, I'm going to make the argument for comics in this episode. So, okay. So, some feedback from the last episode. Tolerance begets intolerance, and I want to point out, maybe it was too not clear with this, but I want to point out a lot of it has to do with America's core values, right? As a larger community, because they're not right. They're a little off. Because you literally have 2, 3, 4 variations of what is right, what is wrong. And certain parts of the country lean certain ways. Certain parts of the countries are mesmerized by power. It's really kind of strange. And because of that, being tolerant to a lot of things that are fucked up that normally we wouldn't tolerate as a country is the big problem. So that's why tolerance is begetting intolerance. It grows like a feverish fucking rash. So, not sure if that clears everything up. I thought it was very clear, but hey, you're the listening audience. I'm the one provided the insight that I can see. And so be it. That's how it is. So I was reading America Isn't Ready for What AI Jobs Will Do. AI Will Do to Jobs. And it's from The Atlantic by Josh Turangle. And I was thinking about a comment made quite a few times in the article because I was thinking about upping my level of working knowledge when it comes to economics, right? And I realized that unlike certain social sciences, he mentions that the fact economists have a hard time predicting the future unless the future is similar to what was in the past. So it's constantly driving, how he compares it is constantly driving forward, looking in the rear view, which is dangerous, right? And I thought that was really interesting. It's also coupled with the idea that we perpetually kind of push laissez-faire government, like when it comes to business, right? Let business do as it does, right? And even though we do supposedly have regulation, self-regulation, and trying to nullify most of that shit, because that's what seems to have happened in the last few years, there is those two ideas together are fucking horrifying. That means the machine's driving and you can't figure out what the machine is going through, going to, which way, which direction. And that is creepy. So the article covers a lot of interesting. I advise you to check it out. It's in the recent issue of Atlantic. There's a couple of items I'm going to just focus on. Superficial comments. But outside of that, I just watched Wonder Man, the series from Marvel, and the chemistry in that show is really great. I like how the transition from one piece to the other, great setups, cliffhangers, ends of episodes, ties right into the next piece, takes interesting directions. The actors work really well off each other. And it was good to see Ben Kingsley comes back as Trevor Slattery. I thought that was kind of cool because the way they managed Iron Man 3 was great. I like the about face. I know they had to do the one shot in order to resolve his storyline because of the pressure that he wasn't the real Mandarin, which is a weird fucking name when it comes to Marvel, but that's what it was written and was constructed. It was has its opinion, has its legacy, and has its structure at those times. One of the interesting things a younger person pointed out to me is a lot of the stuff they've been showing, especially the older stuff, sometimes comes with a disclaimer, which I prefer. I think that's a good idea. I think stuff that existed at some point in time, I don't think the way they do things, I know the stream structure is like potential for editing and course correction or just shelving and warehousing and acting like it didn't exist. That there's supposedly an argument when it comes to comedies in regards to that, because comedies could be really hard and harsh. But it's fucking hilarious, right? So my opinion, like with all the crazy stuff they pulled off back in the day, that you shouldn't really change any of that. If it's fucked up, show it is fucked up. However, the disclaimer concept is interesting because the disclaimer explains what is weird about it. So it's almost like creating a study piece. So even you're going to watch it as a kid or as a person that's not familiar with the work, you're going to be given a heads up that, this could come off as racist, could come off as sexist, this could come off just like completely insensitive and fucked up and just weird in how it was constructed. And this was the thinking at the time. This was the accepting at the time. And if you can wrap it up in great introduction as a panel and let it linger before the piece plays, then you at least prime people to be aware of what they're looking at. Now, some things I don't necessarily understand why they changed because I'm born from those times. So my thinking is like, okay, unless it's brazen, like some of it's like, okay, when you're watching things, you automatically think this is old. So they're gonna say some crazy shit because that's how they perceive the world. It's like watching Eddie Murphy Delirious. Like Eddie Murphy's awesome, right? But watching Delirious, like you realize he's young. And what he's saying, it's still funny, but it's funny based on differently now, like based on like the lack of knowledge he knew then, but he still frameworked it. I'm not gonna get on him for that. It's like listening to old comedy albums. I'm not gonna get on you for that. That's not a thing, right? But yet, in these times, we somehow, it's weird because they kind of created a weird censorship structure that we fought in the 80s. Like I said, we, the collective we. Kids did it too. Like, to me, access to certain things doesn't fucking matter. Unless it's like barbarism or fucking like hardcore pornography or like something to that effect. But even then, people still have access to that now. It really is what you want to subject yourself to. But things need to be explained in proper context because things are too fluid, pun intended, right? So that's the thing. Like, meaning that you have access to things that are forbidden, that are fucked up. But you need to be put into proper context. Like why the fuck did this happen at this point in time? Like, why do we have the crazy fucking thinking then? Like, and sometimes it helps. It's like derogatory word against homosexual males, right? That was a thing. I want to say there was a show, and I can't remember the name of the show right now, that literally put it into context why we don't use that word, right? So that's what it is, right? So I thought the genius of it was it placed it in the proper context and how it's used in English slang, right? It means something completely different, right? And the fact that that exists is interesting. And when you make people aware of certain things and the reason why they're fucked up, sometimes you have the great effect of people becoming self-aware and why they choose not to do things. Like once you know, and it's almost a burden of you knowing. So when you're doing it, now you're being belligerent. So when somebody calls you out on it or punches you in the face or whatever, then you kind of knew, So these are the consequences for those actions, whatever negative consequence they are. I think what they worried about is people initially embracing it and like kind of, oh, this is great. Let's like, no, not all the time is it like that. Okay? Can you laugh? Yes. Why? Because it's fucked up. Because not only are you laughing at the random fucking joke that's there, because it's set up punchline, right? Set up punchline, right? The flow of some of the, especially the older cartoons. But you're also laughing, like, this is fucked up to even pulling us off. Like, this is a thing. This was the norm at this point in time. And then here's what's weird. And I want to point this out to you because I think a lot of people kind of overlook this factor. Is the appreciation of things in pop culture back in the day. Because there is a brazen disrespect, mean-spirited way. Comments, random things, random frameworks existed, right? And then there's an appreciation for that. It's like when a bunch of British bands came over, they're copying doing covers of old rhythm and blues and early rock, proto-rock stuff, right? So when they're coming over here, they're giving automatic homage to their the people they fanned over, right? They fanboy over. So they're sitting there looking like some people make sure they get paid and so on and so forth. And some people's interpretation of that is like, you're unoriginal, who you, like. But what's weird is that in every music scene, in every art scene, in every structure, there is an appreciation. And even appreciation is mirroring. It's still like you have to give the accolades to the person, right? You got to give the proper respect to the person. Like I've been posting a lot of different cover songs, like older cover songs, because I think to myself, like, this is so cool that people do this, because it's the best respect musical artists can do to each other, right? It's different when they're trying to steal stuff and acting like it's their own, right? The only time you pull that off is if you were a turntablist, right, or DJ from back in the day. But even then, you still, like if you have your list of what you're presenting, people still give the nod to it. Like that's still a reference point. That's still like, you thought that was so dope, you wanted to include it in your composition. And that's what makes it cool. That's what makes it interesting. So, I mean, I'm old, right? I'm Gen X. So my thinking is like, building upon things, building upon ideas, it's natural in American society. See, the one thing I will tell you, without a doubt in my mind, if you ever want to understand American culture, you have to understand its subcultures. Because it's the thing that bulldozes all those isms. You have enough people that just have appreciation. I'm a music lover, right? It's one of the major. It's weird because depending on which people you talk to during the course of my life, you'll find I love a lot of interesting things. Like I say interesting things. That's already showing a bias, but it's the truth. Like there's these things I love. Like one thing I'm talking about in the B block today is comics, right? And I'm actually going to give you my take and history of that, as well as the commentary of it, right? That's what the whole episode's for. I figure I'll lighten it up after the intolerance versus tolerance and all that shit, right? So, before I want to segue over to that, though, I got to end on peace because there's a decision has to be made, and I'm still in the process of making it, right? So that's besides the point. So when you have love for something, again, depending on who you talk to that know me well or interact with me, you'll get different things. You'll get politics. Clearly, you've been listening to this. You get sociopolitics shit, right? You'll get me obsessing about albums, like this music and the record industry and comics. I'll talk about comics left and right. Movies, talk about movies left and right, right? I can break down movies more than what I actually present to you. But I present movies to you in such a way that I'm forcing you to go check them out. Because I'm not going to do your homework for you. Which is going to segue right into the next piece. So give me a second. So my obsession is kinetic. I just like I'm interested in it. it definitely changed the way it helped forge a chemistry and alchemy that makes up me, right? And I bestow this on the different people. Like I could tell you, I've taught kids, hundreds of kids, like over long periods of time. And it's weird because the comment every so often comes up, like your energy and your drive, like I'm paraphrasing, the way you express the love for this stuff makes me want to get into it more. I'm interested in it because you make me interested in it. Because I didn't even know this was even an option. Like, and that's what's even crazier about our culture. Because we've kind of whittled everything down to this really strange, archaic ball that, like, I can tell you, I'll make a statement right now, and I know I've already made the statement, that we're in a period of time like it was in the late 80s, cultural. Meaning there's a lot of really cool shit that exists underground or just below the surface, at the lower end of the zeitgeist model, right? And many Americans do not know this stuff exists. The average everyday person doesn't know this is a thing. And I'll say up names, like one of the discussions I had with a younger gentleman, I know I mentioned this in either the last episode or episode before, was about Local H. I said, this band has been around since the early 90s. I says, and they're the casualty for the corporate takeover, massive corporate takeover of radio. The band is still really fucking good. They're amazing live, right? I've watched them 2 or 3 times in the last few years, right? And the energy and just visceral nature of how he attacks the audience, essentially, sonically, is fucking amazing. But I'm also with people that only know him, Scott Lucas, from the perspective of like this archaic childhood encapsulation, this museum model that they have in their heads. Like they're an inactive audience. They stand there mainly like statues. I mean, I even said to him at a show, I said, hey, you should probably consider the idea of lowering the age volume. And he's like, in his mind, he was thinking 18-year-old kids could get in there. I said, no, but there's a lot of kids that would love your fucking music. But again, albums come out and they get very little radio play. And it's, I think, as good as Dead came out like 96, 95, 96, is Ham-Fisted and Bag of Ham or Ham-Fisted? Something like that. That's the first like full LP. And As Good as Dead was the big ones. The Eddie Vedder, the OK, the what is it? What was the major song off that album? Oh, Bound for the Floor, which is the best, in my opinion, comment about Generation X, right? And then there's Pack Up the Cats, which is a few years later. And at that time, I was working at a radio station. And it's a good album. It was different, but it was still a good album. And everything during the time that album came out, within the year after that, there was such a hard shift. And eventually, Here Comes the Zoo comes out. And then he's had him and different drummers have had many albums. It's usually a 2-person setup. Little sidebar. It is funny trying to like say things because I'm not sure if I'm using a different voice when I'm explaining this stuff, but it builds up a lot of like air. So the most I ever burp, period, happens to be when I'm recording this shit. It is fucking annoying. Any which way. So the last album, full-length album, was Refisted. So Ham-Fisted, right? That's the first full-length album. And it was an album done. They reworked the album, and some of the songs like hit harder or more worked out, a little different, right? But it's not a bad nod to the other album. It's a great companion piece, and that's probably the most recent work he's done. There's already talk about our 30th anniversary of As Good as Dead, which is the bigger album. If everybody remembers them as a band, they remember them. This band has existed, though. That's the important point. Take away here. I did a big, quickest layup advertisement. 30th anniversary of As Good as Dead is coming out. And I advise you to go see this band. Like, and if it's all ages shows, bring younger people. Because millennials are strange when they go to concerts. They like sipping their tonic and watching. It's the strangest shit ever. However, Gen Z, especially the ones that like rock, lean towards that direction. And there are some. If you give them something as charged as this, you will get the same, a different type of energy that Gen X would give these shows back in the day. And I'm hoping I see more now. But it's an interesting, it's like a positive version of that energy rather than a cynical, like unloading your frustrations energy. And I think that would help this band a lot. Again, I asked him the question, but he perceived that the places they were playing allowed that. Like maybe the standard X on the kids' hands. No. I have kids, I had friends that were younger, were not able to access this stuff. I literally went with older people, and it was weird to watch the audience. Because that's all you really can do, because they don't really do much. It's the strangest shit ever. It's the reason why I had a hard time accepting the fact of Rage Against the Machine. Now, do I think Rage Against the Machine still put out material despite the fact that Zach's legs fucked up and obviously, yeah. I think they should be working on hodgepodges of stuff, right? Because that's needed right now. And they're still hot as fuck to be able to pull that off, right? Do I think System of a Down should be putting out material now? Yes. Do I think they ever should ease up on the brakes? No, because the shit's been happening. We've been slowly watching. This situation we have going on right now is a situation that was pushed to happen. Again, intolerance begets intolerance. We keep leaning right. And when the corporatist Democrats get in, or the blue dogs, whatever you want to call them, they just like want to hold that post there. And I'm like, no, fuck you. Bring it back. Bring it back. Revise stuff. Bring it back. Give us more voting rights. Give us more. What are you doing? Right? And that's the thing. So these bands see this. Like I posted a Public Enemy song, Icebreaker, right? And it was funny because a person commented and they were thinking to themselves, oh, this is like obviously predicted. No, it was formed in 2003 under Homeland Security. That's the thing, right? Did we have that service before? Yeah, as more investigative, routine, structured for many years. Like you hear Cheech Martin, born in East LA. There was already a culture that was doing this. And there's a larger argument there I'm not going to get into. But the music should never get eased up. And the music that does exist is from new artists are kind of buried. And that's what I'm saying. It's like the late 80s right now. Except shit's not cutting through as much as it should be. Like I listen to community radio, where I'm at, and support it if it exists where you're at. And one of the best albums that came out last year, A Lot of Disputes, No One's Driving the Car, right? Is not played on there. And I was kind of surprised by that. I've been posting a lot of those songs up at Radio America because it's just a good fucking album. It's a like just a punch to the face in a time when everybody's kind of doing this weird folk thing, right? I think I give my top 5. Like Olivia Dean's album was really, really good. And she has a style to her that oozes and works really well than most of the artists doing that style, attempting to do that style. She does exceptionally well. Very articulate, very on point. Rhythm, structure, voice, all works really well. But the Lot of Dispute album is the one that's not necessarily being focused on. I have a pretty good ear. Like I gotta say, over the years, ranging anywhere from fucking Jimmy Cliff to fucking Led Zeppelin to like, Public Enemy, like I'll reference that again. Like I developed the ear. This stuff was coming up as I was coming up. So I'm watching this, right? It's like episode 4 or 5. I mentioned the Run DMC and Aerosmith thing. It's the best way to fuck up the establishment is doing something so radically different. It moves the ground underneath you, which is the point I'm going to make. So, give me a second. So another thing I mentioned in Atlantic, I told you I was to get back to that again. And it was the thing that was brought to my attention really fast. So that's why I ended up bringing most of the issue. Understand, the Atlantic kind of gave you a large heads up. New Republic gave you a large heads up last year of Project 2025. They were the first ones to kind of create that alarm system. And they were talking about it in great detail. They were breaking those stories. And it caught the news cycle, which surprised the shit out of it. Like, because sometimes, like when magazines or newspapers cover certain things, not all the times it catch the thing, but it caught it really well. Because I remember telling these people like a month before it caught the large national news cycle, hey, this is a thing. And the 2025 it's always done every certain cycle. They'll put these structures together. They've been doing it for years, right? So it's one of those magazines I'll reference here and there. There's a few of them. But the one thing they did bring out is the modern attention span. And it's evolved to get worse than they accidentally did during the MTV generation. So the cultural acceleration is being accelerated even more. So you're not able to retain the information or focus on the information enough for it to affect you, which is disturbing. And obviously it's more Generation X, but they related it to film school. And in the article, in the piece, it's a short piece, the great film by Francis Ford Coppola, The Conversation, like one of the professors was saying that they had a hard time getting to the end. They had a hard time focusing on the film because it's a slow burn, right? And I think to myself, I'm like, that is a thing. But here's what's weird. So we pushed the cell phone structure onto kids, right? Which I don't necessarily have an issue with, right? But the management of it is interesting. Now, the biggest demon in American culture is commercials. And those of you on YouTube or whatever platform this is on, they're going to force commercials onto it. I have no control over that. That's their decision-making process. And commercials are strange because they're designed to sell. They're designed to manipulate. They're designed to do whatever Webernise taught them to do, right? And it's interesting because they fuck up the way you perceive things. Because they force the edit. Like, again, the whole system itself is weird because it's designed to fill holes for the commercials. So when you watch a television, you watch a lot of anything that was broadcast on a larger level was always subjected to commercials and ad space, right? They did a large thing in the late 19th century where they basically overhauled everything in the newspapers. They created an inverted pyramid and everything that was laid out after the advertisements, meaning the advertisements are naturally the leaders. I know I've mentioned this before, but I'm reinventing it again, restating it again, because you kind of need to hear this a few times for it to sink in. So the inverted pyramid was designed to cut the articles to fit the holes, the news holes, meaning that the advertisements had the precedence in the paper, not the news. This is why it leans to man bites dog. Is the always, if it bleeds, it leads. This is the mantra of the papers. And this trickles down to all broadcasting. So television news, radio. Radio's strange because radio typically pushes more music, but it does have news items in it, right? So anything that's through the broadcasting branch, to the mass communicating branch, right? Whereas, again, film doesn't come from that branch. It comes from theater, film, photography. It comes from that angle. So they're not one and the same. The branch two is these large series you're getting right, these large miniseries, which they fucked around with the idea on television, but so be it. The point of the article was to show you that the younger people are having a hard time keeping their shit together to do deep focus on what is normally a hot medium, film. And it's offsetting the learning process. Now, I'm cynical enough to say this is on purpose. But it's a healthy cynicism because I know this can be corrected. But the young adult has to realize this has to be corrected. Now, I'm going to stop for a second, pin that up. When I was younger, and I hung around with a bunch of hodgepodge of different artists and different people, the one thing I knew about myself, which eventually people agreed with, is that I had to strengthen and develop more patience for things. Because I knew that in the long run, the more patience I have, the better I can render something. Or the more patience I have, the better I can perform a trick, or do this, or segue this, or write this. I knew it was me against me. Okay? The eye against eye, like Bad Brains, right? It's me fighting myself in order to make myself better. Skateboarders can, and freestyle bicyclists can actually fucking attain to this because this is what they're doing. They're trying to push themselves enough. It's them versus their limitations and to see they can bring out the best in themselves, right? And why I say them specifically rather than the other sports is because other sports are group related. This is an individual thing, right? It's like for the other sports, it would be the person trying to get better baskets or try to throw a better spiral. But that's in the larger branch sports, the group sports. It's noticed, but it's more of a team dynamic structure. I mean, you did your part to get to that point, whereas the skateboarder and the person has to do their shit individually, like the guitarist, so on and so forth. They're trying to achieve and work against themselves in such an interesting way. I knew this as an artist. Like when I was drawing stuff, I did a comic strip for a couple of years, right? So I knew this was a thing. And I had to figure out ways to increase that threshold. The threshold of pain, which is one thing, to accept the shit that's going to happen, the physical, emotional, that's stuff, right? That's real life stuff, right? But I also realized I had to extend my threshold of patience to try to understand things, to not necessarily go and try to force shit to happen, right? But try to work on getting a better outcome, trying to see if I can last longer doing this, doing that. This is the task people do to themselves. In the culture of acceleration, that is not wanted. But what bothers me the most is that younger people, I don't even think they're fully fucking understand the first thing, the eye against eye. I think that part has been kind of cut out a little. So they just naturally roll on thinking, okay. I mean, the one thing young adults tell me, like, time is moving by fast for them. Right? And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, to the point where the adulthood is crazy. It's because it's crazy. Again, core values. It is all sorts of fucked up. But it's fucked up on purpose. Remember, I told you about the overreaching, right? That's the thing. The more you think about it, the more fucked up it is, right? So the idea of like occupying your time, annexing your time, creating unnecessary bureaucracy to fuck you up is a thing. It's weaponized structure against you. That is the everyday things, the outside agencies outside of you, right? That stupid ass boss is like, oh, you need to have a sick thing. No, I don't. Yeah, you do. And like, no, I'm gonna go to the doctor, but like, yeah, I don't really need the sick thing. I'm fucked up right now. Like, oh, you don't understand on page 12, section C. I'm like, I mean, are you a whole asshole? That's all I can think of myself. Like, but those people exist. And then you have design that creates those situations. So when a person that doesn't recognize that in order to make things better, they have to work on themselves. And they have to challenge themselves and unfuck their heads and get out of the video game world and get out of this, because that's all been designed for that. Like the video game structure right into the cell phones is a fucking thing. The dopamine is fucking crazy and it's highly addictive, right? I'm not saying I'm better than that. I'm just saying it's a thing. I'm old enough to recognize that's a thing. Some of the younger generation, Generation Z specifically, depending on which phase along, depending on how much the parents put the work in, they're not aware of it because it's the norm for them. Like kids slipping up become aware of it, right? It's just something to consider. That was another piece. The fact that they couldn't figure out the ending and couldn't appreciate the ending, because the ending is fucked up. Conversation, that is. The movie by Francis Ford Coppola. Gene Hackman is the star of it. So I would check it out if I was you. That's the thing. So I'm looking at, so there's a lot of dispute. Like the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack to Tron Ares is pretty fucking good too. And Olivia Dean. McCluskey came out an album last year. That shit was fucking awesome. And to see them on tour again was fucking great. Now, McCluskey, in my opinion, was one of those bands that should have been the third wave of punk rock. At the Drive-In, Go-Go Bordello, McCluskey, there's a few other ones that refused, that really were kind of, they had just gained a lot of notoriety for what they were doing. And a lot of them had moved on or became defunct or something. Like it never happened the way it was supposed to happen. And it was interesting because they were definitely outside of the mainstream to a degree and would have kicked everything right in the ass at the right time. McCluskeyism came out, and right after that was like, that's it, I'm done. And if depending on which version of that album you get a lot of really cool shit for a decent price. But the new album came out, and I'm trying to think of what else came out last year that was really notable. There's Send Off for Trugoy from De La Soul. That was I think officially it's on vinyl now. You can pick up. The album was released, I think, electronically sometime in November. So there's different works that came out last year that were definitely notable. But again, not in the mainstream. Not a thing that's highly noted, like, and talked about fluidly. Like that is where we're at. Like when The Life of Agony came out, I'm trying to think. Life of Agony, Nirvana Bleach, End of the Pixies. The spin-offs, like you have the earlier Pennywise and the band, not the fucking character. All that, around that time, it was like a lot of things were suppressed. Because understand, around that time, American whitewashing had began. And that yielded, because somebody asked me, like, so what did that yield? Like, what was the result of that? A creeper dude that was on some shitty fucking show was better off dead, honing and focusing his energy on as a praying mantis on the fucking kids at Nickelodeon, right? That was a thing. Every time you have like shit that's too squeaky fucking clean and creepy, yeah, that's a problem right there. But yeah, no, the result was shitty boy bands and shitty girl bands and shitty fucking like this mall stuff. The shit that failed in the late 80s became a real big thing in the 90s. And then because of that, and because that glazed over everything in the late 90s, and maybe in the late 90s, this is maybe like 97, but it wasn't mainstream yet. Like it was pop culture, and it kind of that's what fucked up a lot of the what it was established in the 90s. That whitewashing led into that and led into this really weird, like, fucked up culture at the beginning of the 2Ks where everything's buried. Like, you don't even know what really is going on, and you're giving all these weird, like, that's where mall punk came from versus pop punk, which there is a fundamentally difference. And it is a flip a coin to the side, right? But there's a lot of interesting shit that came out around that time, but it was kind of buried. Again, like there was this whole like second wave hijack of rap post Tupac and Biggie's fucking death. That, I mean, you end up with Sean Combs. I mean, that's a thing, right? And you see that result, right? But you end up having all these really washed over things. This crazy disco structure. Like they even robbed techno and kind of went that way, and that's how a lot of people, unless you were openly mocking it, you became famous from that. Like Eminem became famous from that. Bloodhound Gang became famous from that because honestly, based on their first two albums, what they ended up doing later on was really strange, but it was still fucking entertaining. But that's how they became relevant. And there's a lot of things that happened around that time that just seemed weirdly washed over. And it was the ride of, like, you couldn't have rated R horror movies. It was PG-13, almost everything across the board. It was all a service, that whole weird, like, millennial whitewash that started in, like, 86, 87. And if you're my age, you like, this is bullshit. And you ignored most of it, right? You ignored these, like, this is, like, first time I'll talk to younger guys, and they'll talk about Power Rangers. I'm like, what? Right? I remember that when that show first showed up. And it was like, somebody's flipping around on TV. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, this is old 70s Japanese shit. I'm like, no, what? I didn't know what to make of it. I'm looking at this going, this is, and then I'm meeting people that are a few years younger than me that they're locked in. And I'm like, this is like let's smash Transformers and Voltron and whatever else together and chop sake kung fu from the early 70s. I'm like, this is even like Wu-Tang Clan stuff. Like this is some weird stuff. But they ate it up. This was their thing. This was their programming based on the Full House, the Just the 10 of Us, the weird fucking shit that it came out of, like, they were raised on that. So, of course they accepted stuff because the stuff that I was aware of was now not a thing. And that's a weird situation to have. Like, millennials keep Thundercats as a comic book alive. I think I read the first 12 issues. I liked it. It was interesting. I vaguely remember it because it wasn't really for me. It was kind of like on the cusp. If that makes any sense. Like I'm now not focused on that. But here's what's weird. I'm old and I still like cartoons. I can get behind them. They make sense to me. There was this really weird renaissance. I know there's a future episode I'm supposed to do. There was a really interesting renaissance a few years back when you have like the regular show up, Rick and Morty. What's the one from Disney that I thought was really exceptional? Gravity Falls. You have a lot of these shows that just showed up on the scene and was almost like a new age of interesting stuff. Like the regular show and Amazing World of Gumballs, like pretty much a amped up animated version as close to Monty Python they could possibly get in these modern times. It is a crazy show, but it's definitely worth investing time in. That I understood. This other stuff that existed during this period of time, I really didn't. It didn't make any sense. I got SpongeBob. I understood SpongeBob because SpongeBob was the replacement for Ren and Stimpy. And the same methodology which Ren and Stimpy used, SpongeBob kind of adopted. to a certain degree. So I accepted that, but other things I'm like, what is this? Like the first time I seen boy bands, I'm like, this can't be a thing. And it's a thing. Like you're seeing a lot of people, like there's grown women right now still focused on this. There's dudes, like the dudes that went into that. I'm like, what is going on here? How is this successful? This was like literally laughed off the books, but they figured out how to make it work. Shit, they figured out how to get rid of talk shows, daytime talk shows. You know, especially off Geraldo Rivera get hit in the head with a chair. They figured out how to do it, right? Because they know how to manipulate the situation. It's their machine. They get it. With that said, so there's something I have to decide, and it's been a back and forth with a few people, right? Now, I need you to figure this out. Now, I typically don't read comments if there's any. I don't really give a shit. I know people, if there was a bunch of nest of shit coming out about what I'm saying, I would have heard about it already. I wouldn't have given a fuck, but I would have heard about it, right? Why? Why don't I give a fuck? Because people want to shit in your fucking tuba before you can blow it to them. Right? We live where the asshole ratio in this world is outstanding. Because at some point in time, we made assholes, I don't know, we painted them in a better light. I don't know. It's not like they're standing for something. They just want to take a shit in somebody's tuba because they think it's funny. That's a thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really care. Right? So I have to decide whether I'm going to do another season. There is a special that I have, and this was written way before this was even a concept. And I've told you about the trauma ghosts, right? I'm dealing with the void, and I know what it is, and I'm going to define it more so in a few episodes from now, because it's a two-part piece. It's going to tie into what I discussed in this whole A block, loosely. And if I'm not going to do a season 4, I need to pull from season 4 and what I have laid out for season 3 to figure out how I'm going to cobble the remaining episodes of this season, which is season 3. I also want to know if you want the first season posted. I think it's 10 episodes of that. And the reason why is because I realized I think Spotify has them, but YouTube doesn't. And like one of the expansions we tried doing, the response from, I guess, the read over was like horrified by what I present. And I'm like, that's fucking hilarious because it sucks they're not going to accept it and post the episodes. But the fact that they did that, and I'm like, I'm not sure like if I should wear that as a badge, because maybe I should take up shitting in people's tubas. I don't know. It's probably a better decision that they didn't, because fuck it, it is what it is. But I really need you to decide whether I'm going to keep doing this, because I can wrap everything up in a reasonable bow. But there is a special, like I said. The special's really long. And like season 1, it is written out. It is several pages long. And it should be put together as a work. I could probably eke it out. But it's a natural conversation about something I experienced in life. And it was initially posted at some point in time when it was rough. It got a lot off my chest at that point in time because I can't understand this. And what's weird is as I'm getting older, I'm realizing this is design. The overreach is breaking enough social glue that forming things from a natural standpoint, despite the fact we still have a great American culture. And you're like, what do you mean? I'm turning on it. No. Musically, in the arts, there's a lot of dope shit. And if you have a hard time getting to that, take a class. Go to different places. Step outside of your normal fucking bubble. Go check out artists that you normally typically wouldn't check out. Go check out paintings, galleries, right? Go read a comic book. Go read fucking novel. Like, get out of your comfort zone, because I guarantee you there is a lot of culture out there that has been suppressed for quite some time. They created the aqueduct system in '98. I'm not shitting you. I'm not fucking with you. This happened. So, American culture, which is naturalistically, which is more subculture based, exists at a profound level. And just because the mainstream business structure doesn't pick it up and say, hey, this is a treasure, because they can't control it. That's the reason why. You know, a lot of spew gets played on the radio, right? That's the example. That's going to fuck things up. You go to the Midwest, right? And you set up a small little fucking indie station, middle of the Midwest, that's playing the most fucked up country music possible, right? I'm going to weigh in on country music. Some of it's fine. But that's it. That's all they've ever heard. This is all we play all the fucking time, right? And I'm not even going to choose a crazy artist, like something that's like, I'm just going to get Violent Femmes, their first fucking album. Play that on the radio station for 72 hours and watch the fucking place buckle. Because something like that, and there's a lot of like great songs on that album, right? But it will fuck up the status quo in which they normally broadcast, how they just kind of circle jerk the situation. And the ones that know it will appreciate it, and they will bubble over. The ones that don't will hate it. And the ones that are in between, which is always an interesting group, they'll go, this is interesting. And the first few times they'll be like, what the fuck? Then eventually they're like, this is kind of cool. That situation. You know, this is why, if you're wondering why the conservatives have been saying, and Democrats in support thereof, are saying, no, we must fight these culture wars. That's why they've been fighting the culture wars. We haven't really been saying it. And I know Gen X in general. And fuck you if you don't agree with me, because then that means you sold the fuck out. Right? Have a crazy fucking palette of music. And we should be defending it. And guess what? It's not the Def Leppard. Right? It literally is the Faith No More. It literally is the Jane's Addiction. It literally is the shit that we knew worked. That changed everything. And that's the newer bands, not even the old staple ones. Les Claypool's touring right now with Claypool, Lennon Delirium, the Frog Brigade. Primus itself is fucking dope as hell. How come we're not supporting that? Right? The Lennon Claypool Delirium is Sean Lennon, John Lennon's youngest son. If you haven't listened to this yet, these albums are fucking awesome. South of Reality. Just check it out. If you just stop listening to what the fuck I'm saying. Pause this shit. Pull up another screen. YouTube it. Why? Because you'll get more money off YouTube, right? That's the thing. It's fucking awesome. It's tripped out, crazy stuff. It sounds like fucking, like it's really good. The contrast between their voices are great. It's interesting shit. And we should be talking about that a lot more. Just, it's something that's amazing to me. I need to know if you want me to keep this going. And the way I'm going to know, you don't even need to comment. You don't need to say, you don't need to do that. Share the idea with other people. Right? Say, hey, I've been listening to this. Check this out. You know, your 90-year-old grandmother. I'm pretty much sure I'll piss the person off, but it is what it is, right? But if you want to watch your fucking Uncle Henry, who's, Fox inundated, loses shit, why not him? The reason why is because I'm going to basically go on a thing and going to work on a larger book when it comes to this stuff. Because I think it's needed, and I think I'll do better watching people try to shit in my tuba in front of a bunch of people, right? Watch people shit in my tuba in front of a bunch of people. So live. And I want to do it like that. And somebody suggested doing it as a comic. Maybe. That's an idea. I don't necessarily... Like, there's quite a few people in my real everyday life that want me to do this more. And I'm like, but I'm not even, like, attributing things as much as I should. I'm literally speaking off the cuff. This is how I am on the day-to-day basis. Highly indifferent about your fucking opinion about things. If you're going to ask me the question, I'm going to give you the answer. You might not like the answer I'm going to give you. Guaranteed. Right? Even if it's telling you, I'm sorry, but AOC makes less than $1 million. That's her net worth, right? Isn't that the story that broke today? Because apparently everybody was like, oh, well, she makes a lot. She isn't that worth it. He just said AOC. So there's a bunch of fucking people foaming over that. I need to give out my pants of shit in that tuba. Right? A relative of mine said to me, man, why don't you do crazy openings like you did the first season? Like the catheters and all that stuff. I says, I'm not even thinking about that, but maybe that's the idea. Maybe I'll do that. If I do season 4, right? I probably want to go to season 5, but if I do season 4, I have to consider how I'm going to format it, what I'm going to make, how I'm going to improve this. Now, I don't have a team of people. I don't have an editor. Clearly, if you're not listening, you're not fucking paying attention, sir. Oh, ma'am. Like, clearly, off the cuff. I have bullet points. I have notes, right? I just pulled up article pieces, right? I think you should check out. But in all honesty, like, I don't have any of that. I'm barely wanting to advertise this shit because, in my opinion, I do believe the carry-on piece. And this is what I'm asking thereof you. If you like what the fuck I'm saying and you kind of agree with me, even if you think I'm a little touched, so be it. Share the madness, right? And that will kind of give me an idea where I'm at. If there's a thumb up or fucking, I don't know, I prefer middle finger than hook 'em horns. I'm more punk rock than fucking metal. Although I do respect metal, right? Then so be it. Kind of give me that accolade. I can format this tighter. Because understand, I'm spending a lot of time. I'm like an hour into the thing. Because the comic book thing is going to be a bit. Like, this is probably going to be close to a 2-hour episode. But I would appreciate that feedback in general. So I'm going to record the B block, or the next block, separately from this, at a separate point in time, so my candor will be different. But there'll be a lot of notes to that. So I'm hoping you appreciate this episode. I'm hoping you appreciated the ones up to this point. The goal is to tie it all up together at the very end. But I have to consider modifications, because if I end this in season 3, I might go as far as 13 episodes, 14 maybe, altogether. And that will be the bow at the end. And then this will probably be looked at differently. Or I could take the whole fucking thing down. If you think I'm just talking shit out of my ass most of the time and not making any sense and I'm too weird and fringe, and so be it. It is what it is. Then send me another middle finger, I guess. I don't even know how you make that negative. You're thinking, well, middle fingers towards you are not negative. I'm from the East Coast, man. No, it's not. We've been on enough punk rock shows. I think I'm well over 100 by this point in time. No, it's not. Right? It's not a thing. So, in which way, I appreciate you checking everything out and checking in with this. I'm going to give you a B block. It's a B block comics. Episode 8 of Fistful of Fuckery. So, this is going to give some clear understanding of how I got into all of this stuff. But at the same point in time, I'm going with the pluses and minuses. Now, my venture into comic books took place in the mid-'80s because something took place that I didn't fully understand. I'm looking at it and I'm realizing there is something happening here that I don't fully understand. The shit that I liked and I was interested in, and many other kids, started changing or disappearing. Meaning that, so shows, Saturday morning cartoons, and things we just kind of took in. Now at the time, understand, HBO existed. I wasn't raised with I'm Gen X, so I'm not raised with artifact child mindset, if that makes any sense. I wasn't a precious commodity, the pro-choice. It wasn't necessarily, that stuff came up because of the pro-lifers, because they're going to select what we do. They're going to push their religion onto us, right? So things started changing. And now I look back at it, I know what happened. The Great American Whitewash. So they started simplifying things, going back to making everything functional, not as gray with content, reinventing content in a very strange way. So the criticism for cartoons back in the day was when Reagan got in, he deregulated a lot of stuff. One of the things was that, for the most part, the guidelines that guided everything, every programming you see on television, was kind of changed. So cartoons could basically market to people. They can be large commercials. Now, there's criticism of this, but I'll be real honest with you. I think that kind of stoked some of the creativity. That didn't fuck me up as much. What fucked me up was that what I liked just went away. Thunder Art Barbarian is a cartoon that exists 21 episodes. You get the box set. It's now currently a comic book because Dynamite Comics is relaunching a lot of the older stuff. So if you really are if you my age and you kind of hey, I really like that stuff, and you don't want to be this weird fucked up nostalgia person, which I don't necessarily get along with those people because they isolate things and that's it. It's just, hey, look, it's like a tadaksh for them, mental tadaksh, mental knickknack. So I'm sitting there going, okay. So what they did is they relaunched Thundercats, which is really good. I read the first 12 issues. They relaunched Silverhawks, which, the Inhumanoids, which is more like a Generation W or Jones' Generation cartoon, kinda. And they did Thunder Art Barbarian. I read the first issue. I was hoping it was going to be good. It was actually not bad. It was pretty tight. I'm just hoping the story gets interesting. I'm probably going to be invested in it for at least for a certain number of issues. So what comic books gave to me, why I got into them, is because, so I had a long-distance cousin so Spider-Man had the alien symbiote suit. And I didn't necessarily understand that then because television itself, especially in the 80s, they really didn't build upon things. Chronology and stories and threading and long-form narrative wasn't necessarily a thing. The goal is, hey, look, this is shiny and new. You have a loose narrative to it. Go buy the toy. And that's what Reagan kind of brought to the table. Now, devil's advocate here. I think that did inspire a lot of us to kind of really create the narratives because the narratives are so fucked up. I mean, they were just cheesy. Like sometimes the things that didn't connect. Transformers was probably worse with this earlier on than G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is the only one that seemed to have a loose narrative. These are the two dominant cartoons. I didn't really know anybody who watched He-Man. Like that, He-Man's a weird fucking anomaly. At least in my book, it is. I don't really know. I think She-Ra was kind of more interesting, but I vaguely remember She-Ra. Like, because what happened is I detoured. I said, you know what? Fuck this. At a relatively not young age, but a relatively, I don't even start to watch movies. So like for me, HBO was kind of like a rotation. So if I can catch HBO, I rotated it. Like it was like one of those. It was a pocket where I had cable because cable was cheap, and if I was home, then it was pretty much either MTV or that, or listening to music, or whatever. Like books weren't a thing in my household yet, so a lot of that was kind of skirted. I didn't really have a normal household. Like so, what you would then know, like, oh, it must be backed up parent. Oh, God must be in your life. Like all that shit didn't exist, and I wasn't the only person. Like this was pretty common. It was probably worse because of where I grew up. Okay, so. There was this distant cousin that I knew. Can't remember his name because he was like fourth removed. Like he was there, and I run into him every so often. And I asked him, "What is the deal with Spider-Man? Is that like electric powers?" I had no clue what the fuck content that was. Right? He's like, "No." So he goes on explaining how he got the suit. Like he had to go into Secret Wars, and I kind of understood it. Like he did a good job with that. And I said, well, where do you get this stuff from? So I'm thinking, I've never seen comic books like physically in the store. Like, I didn't go to news shops because news shops in Massachusetts was strange because porn shops, not PORN and not POWN accent, they looked like news shops. So like they were always sketchy as fuck. So I didn't necessarily go into any of them. I didn't really necessarily notice comic books because the launch, like right before the 86ing of cartoons, the superpowers, Darkseid is introduced, Firestorm's introduced into the Super Friends. Now, Super Friends is, Super Friends explains the problem with cartoons for Generation Xers. So if you have the ability to stream, 15 minutes of an episode, don't go further than that. I've showed my kids this. They were like, what the fuck is that? I'm like, I don't know. It's the weirdest fucking jankiest shit you've ever seen in your life. But we're supposed to believe this is the Justice League, but they don't call it the Justice League. No, Hanna-Barbera's, it kind of came out of that fold. But towards the end, during the Superpowers figures, they started creating structure, better structure, right? It was weird because you have comic books, comic books is definitively the longest form of human narrative. Like, Batman's been around for over 80 years. I know I've already mentioned this. Superman's been around for quite some time, right? I think just as long, right? If not longer. Spider-Man's been around for long. So these books are fresh as fuck. And they've been there for a while. Now, I'm going to read you the stuff that they tell you that's a benefit. Don't get me wrong. I'm pulling from data just to give to you. Because if you're listening and let's say you've become disconnected from comic books or never read comic books, or you're a parent and you're not sure if your kids should read them, they are really good for literacy. They help tighten a lot of shit. But again, I'm going to read that data. So my interest was like, okay, so where do you get these books from? He told me there's a shop that exists in the middle of Somerset, Massachusetts, right? And I'm like, I don't know how the fuck to get there. And he just gives me this weird-ass direction. I kind of eventually understood where it was, and I kind of stumbled onto it. because I drove past it one day. I just remember the name. The name of the shop is Park Nostalgia, right? And I want to say it moved. Because by the time I ended up frequenting it, it was in a different spot by that point in time. Shout out to Sunset Records and Park Nostalgia, actually, which eventually became Still Point at some point in time. Is the whole almost the death of comic books reading in that area was fucking strange, right? But any which way. So I ended up deciding, making a conscious decision, and this was around the same time Tony Danza went from Taxi to Who's the Boss. So classism, struggle, gray area was like one of the biggest things whitewashing had to include. I'm going to get into this a little more with Fox at some other point in time. Because Fox, when Murdoch bought Fox, he ran concurrently to the whitewash, meaning that the whitewash, it was dictated, this is what they needed to do to soften the content, and it was just really designed to kind of end critical thinking, just give you a passive pillow material. Now, there's outliers. I would say Golden Girls is an outlier because the writers from Golden Girls came from like Soap and a lot of Norman Lear things. And Cheers, because Cheers went on a different angle. So those are maybe the two biggest outliers, because they would address things in the same tactic. I mean, I didn't see the full Cheers until it came out on DVD years later. But the fact that it survived is fucking amazing. Like, because usually shifts in shows like that, but they had to push narrative forward. They had to change construct narrative. I know I talk about this loosely in season 1. Little sidebar. Season 1 is probably going to present itself at some point in time during the off season of this. I know I asked you the question about should I continue this. There is actually some people that wanted me to. As you're getting stuff out, you think they're like, yeah, because not all the time it kind of your narrative, you're disrupted sometimes. We go back and forth. It's a normal conversation where I just note on things and give you feedback for it. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Like, I get the logic behind that, but I really don't know if this is worth the time. So again, so in which way? I mentioned season 1, it has an essay in good portions of it, right? And I want to revisit that at some point in time because the Marvel thing happened. And before Endgame, I really thought Marvel Studios should have stopped and just did loose threading for at least 2 years before putting any major film into focus. And they could have done loose threading easily through the television, and they didn't. And they just wanted to launch back into the bombardment of films. Then COVID happened, which fucked up their whole cycle. So at some point in time, I'm going to address that, because I still think what they did, at least for the first 3 phases, was really smart and opened up American cinema to a degree that we don't fully understand yet. So needless to say, so I'm introduced to this shop. I go in there a couple of times. I grab just random books. And then gradually I start noticing the local market at the time, Shaw's had a rack. Some of them had racks. And then I noticed, because I understand Walmart hadn't become world dominant yet, so it wasn't in the area. I know Walmart has those special edition packages. I don't even know if they have them anymore. I haven't seen them for a bit. But anyway, they do. There was a period of time they used to issue in these Walmart editions, variant cover editions, and just to spice things up. But those collections showed up in Toys R Us at some point in time. So the comic books were cycling through. But here's what's weird. At the time, comic books were direct, meaning that you went to a curated shop that ordered just comic books, right? Or baseball cards or whatever at the time. Because understand, the shops earlier on were not like the shops they are now. Now they're more kid-friendly and more of like geekdom. Where even though they were that back then, it was still skeevy. Like some of the shops you went to were like, what exactly did I walk into? Is that person like ramming a vibrator somewhere? Like you're kind of confused what the fuck is going on there. And it's the collection of readers were all over the fucking place. So it was just different type of customers. It had more of respect for both sports and for comics. It was kind of cool. Like there was some dope shit going on in them. So I'm like, okay, no problem. At the time, I met the former owner Jesse, but I didn't develop a rapport with him until way later. And more likely he doesn't fucking remember. I was just one of the random customers that every so often they'll, hey, can you get this for me? Hey, can you. So which way? So I got a few issues, and then I realized there's magazine racks. They started showing up, and this is before Batman. Like I think Batman's still being talked about, but it was before like you knew who the fuck Batman was. There was a lot of like who was going to be. Michael Keaton was Batman 89, and I don't think Superman 4 had come out yet. So this is around that pivot. So I decided to kind of detach from television. Like I reduced until eventually I just wasn't watching television that much. And it's the strangest shit ever because the kids that you interact with, some of them decide not to do the same thing. Like music became a larger focus and comics became a focus and also magazines. Around this time, I started focusing on different magazines because I didn't know I knew the world offered more and television was changing so drastically and so quickly that I couldn't relate to it anymore. Like it wasn't interesting enough, right? Perfect example, A-Team. A-Team became fucking weird and wonky. I remember watching some of the episodes of it, but it became very strange at some point in time. Like they were hired by somebody because they were trying to bring that was like fucking alien to me. Like what the fuck happened to that show, right? Like there was a lot of weird shit that was taking place around this time, right? First Blood Part 2, what a big fucking pile of shit that is, right? If you ever seen First Blood, the ones afterwards, the only one that's good is the fourth one, right? Because it marries into the first one, but the other two are just like fucking weird ass, rusky fucking propaganda pieces, like the strangest shit I've ever seen in my life. I'm like watching this stuff, going, "This is fucking stupid. Like, what the hell is going on here?" Same thing with fucking Rocky. Like, he eventually would figure out how to make those things work at some point in time later on. But my God, again, it was around this time. The ninja phase just happened, so back in the day, you had Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3. That was already called over. Like Snake Eyes get the props for that. When you wanted to correlate the information, so that was there. All that was there. Anime was on UHF and in Southeast New England UHF. I can't remember. I know it was channel 25 on the UHF dial, normal television, and they used to run anime like Tranzor Z, Guy King. Well, the American version. It wasn't the uncut Japanese versions. That was the first time I ever realized that there was a cult behind that. So anyway, because it was a toy store, I used to market on that station a lot. Anyway, so I disappear off this and I decided to seek out. So I get Web of Spider-Man and I eventually get the Detective Comics at some point in time. It was like before issue 600. Because the only story that really stuck, and what's weird is the transition was strange because I didn't realize comic books were written up. Meaning that television at the time was written in the scattergun effect, except in the 70s, right? 70s was strange because 70s, they brought real world issues. Like anywhere from Good Times to fucking, I would say Freebie at the beginning, that's a movie. What do you call it there? Freddie Prinze show. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But like you had Sanford and Son, you had All in the Family, and so on and so forth. Happy Days was strange because Happy Days was just weird. Like I always forget that they do 2 tiers of that at some point in time, and there's a bunch of splinter shows that shoot off of it, like Laverne and Shirley and whatnot. So all those shows were just interesting because it was like still watching people try to make ends meet, and they were more realistic at that time. And that all disappears. Again, Tony Danza goes from Taxi, I think Taxi was a great show, because it shows you people trying to struggle, and there's comedy within the framework of the things in it, and there's some sincerity to it. Like Ruth Gordon, Bud Cort just died. Character actor in a lot of films. One of the more recent films is one of my favorite films, Life Aquatic. He plays a bondsman. But I'm just trying to get my kids to watch Harold and Maude at some point in time. That's like a legendary film. But Ruth Gordon's in that. And she does a sequence where she's in Judd Hirsch's cab. Great episode. Like Taxi was definitely a good show, but everybody was struggling. Everybody was trying to get to where they needed to go in transitions. Rent had to be due, car payments had to be due, so on and so forth. Right. Whereas by the time you get to the late '80s, it's just like there's a hard detachment from that reality. Roseanne Barr brings her show back to that point. And that's the one thing you can always understand. She may be weird right now, but for the most part, she did stuff that needed to happen with her show. And it went in an interesting direction. I'm aware that took place. I ended up seeing those in reruns, like years later. So anyway, so I detached myself from this, and I'm watching things basically only on the weekends, and it would be over when I had some stability in my life. My normal weekday life was a circus, unpredictable shit. Not going to get into the heavy stuff, but it was chaos from the age of 5 to 11 maybe. So there's interesting pieces about Gen X, and I just happen to fall into the worst situations because of just adult decisions, right? So what happened is I ended up finding stability in reading comics, and I didn't realize what comic books were to do for me. I didn't realize they were written up because it predicates itself on older issues and continuity. And that right there was highly addictive because you start understanding the world. The world is being built within the framework of the comic book more so than in the television at the time. Current cartoons do this, right? Like, if I end up going to season 5, actually, the end of season 4, is it? Yeah, I think that's what it's planned for. I'm supposed to be covering Amazing World of Gumball because I think that right there defines Generation Z in a great, brilliant way. There's a few shows that tie with that, but that one in particular. And that show, in these modern times, had a tendency to juggle continuity and structure. And events that happen in early episodes affect other episodes, which is great. Seeing that world building is extremely important for a kid. Why? Because they can see cause and effect. They can see decisions, whether decisions are bad or not. They've been reading the books long enough, that comes up, right? That, and you're reading dialogue, narrative, right? And visual in such a way that you're not going, well, I don't understand the content of this scene written out in a book. Like, I don't like the way the adjectives and the way they describe things, vocabulary is not necessarily up to par yet. Comic books bring you there in a very interesting way. If you don't believe me, Alan Moore and a lot of the British writers showed up in the mid to late 80s, around the time American whitewashing happened. Right after, I'm not sure if Alan Moore took over Swamp Thing by this point, but they elevated the medium. You already had good writers. Frank Miller already did his run on Daredevil. Like, you had good writers, and the art was changing, palette was changing, which I thought was really good. You had George Perez's work, late George Perez, unfortunately, but all that had changed. So when I jumped onto that, I don't know if it was a standard throughout the U.S. Like, I wasn't sure if I was the only kid that just realized television is a big pile of shit right now. And the pendulum does swing. Don't get me wrong. Television does swing, but the problem is by the point it does that, I no longer have access to cable, household life decisions. I no longer really care as much. I'm already watching cinema. And I'm realizing, wait, there's directors that construct these things, and there's cinematographers, and there's actors. Like, I'm now going down that rabbit hole, right? And music, big thing, right? Music's always been a big thing in my life. So comic books itself end up becoming the medium that replaces television. And underground comics, COMIX, underground stuff, ends up covering certain pieces, end up covering real life, or put superhero shit or fantasy shit into real context. Like, there is hard cause and effect. Now, I'll read off the list to you that comic books is known for, and I'm going to also add another thing. So, it helps with emotional benefits, educational benefits, cognitive benefits, right? Reading comprehension goes through the roof. Your vocabulary increases tenfold. Like, with a book, the word just sits there. With a comic book, the word sits there and you see the action that is brought right in front of you. You see the cause and effect. You put the word into context. You look for contextual clues, and you eventually find them. Sometimes you even ask, like, hey, what's this? I mean, a lot of kids I knew didn't really have access to all of this stuff. I mean, I grew up in a city that, like, used bookstore. There was like one Honeywell was a used bookstore in the North End of Fall River, right? But there really weren't a lot of access. I mean, unless you come from like a really like upper middle class family, you didn't necessarily have that. I didn't have any. That wasn't a thing. Now, here's a strange thing. I'm saying this almost like, oh, feel bad. Not really. Like, in all honesty, I'll be honest with you, I went through those mechanics, and the search process and finding things was helpful. Like, critical thinking in order to gain things. Now, when I started reading comic books, it was scattered. I didn't get the issues together. I didn't, so I missed key issues, and by the time I was aware that I missed those certain issues, some of them were worth money, because understand, like, Venom is the end result of the Spider-Man symbiote suit. So some of those books popped off really fast. That, and Todd McFarlane, one of the great artists of comics, was drawing from Marvel. So key issues, Sam Keith eventually came into the fold at some point in time. A lot of really good, talented artists showed up. So if I wasn't on my game, I couldn't figure out where to get, okay, I have issue, 42, 43, 44. I don't have 45. I can find 47. 46 is also missing too. Like, you're in that situation. And not only always having access to comic book shops, which are direct, because understand there's a splinter effect. There's direct sales, which go right to the shops, and there's newsstand sales. So sometimes when you look at price guides and whatnot, they will consider them as variants, because there is a certain rollout for the direct sales, which are guaranteed sales, and orders done, showed up. Whereas newsstand was based on whatever this newsstand ordered, that was it. They got him. They usually had barcodes in them or different things in the bottom corner box. Or sometimes different prices too. I did notice that earlier on. So I think when I started buying comics, they weren't even $1 yet. So that was a thing. Like, well, comic books like $4, $5 a pop. No, that's a lot of money. But yeah, but the quality is fundamentally different. So you're paying for the coloring, the paper stock, the cardboard cover, like, or the cardstock cover, and the DC's doing a brilliant job with that. So you're paying more because of the quality had increased, because they realized it had to become an artist venue. Because the artist became the other coin in the storyteller. So great artists, great combinations, writers helped everything. And this is around the time they started doing this. Okay? So visual literacy and actually critical thinking, because what happens is kids learn via comics subtext. Now, in television, it exists. Like I said, Cheers had that. There was nods, there was inside jokes, because the jokes couldn't be as rude
but they were quips, great quips. So sometimes you didn't get the context of that. Comic books helped inspire that, right? Typically, the subject matter in comic books were uplifting, even though the situations get really dire. Perseverance and vigilance is taught to kids, which I thought was always great. And you're like, well, not every comic book is like that. Well, the majority are, right? You get into some murky ass fucking waters, because they did. In the 90s, they get into a lot of murky waters. There's a lot of deaths, a lot of like hard cause and effects. Many situations, things seem dire, but perseverance, consistency, it teaches you a lot of those mechanics. What happens is the self-esteem of the reader, which is my situation, because I ended up segueing right into books. And it was interesting because my defiance towards certain things, which is clearly, I have that innate engine inside of me, maybe seek other books out, books that weren't as interesting, like or were not liked. Socially, I will tell you, adults had fucking issues with comic books. And at the time, I didn't understand why. Because I didn't know the historic structure when it comes to comic books. Sidebar there. I'll get back to that at some point. So, reading this stuff, I realized the continuity. Like, I didn't realize that there was a few Robins. I didn't realize that the last Robin had died in transition thereof. I didn't realize that actually that happened when I was reading. I didn't realize that I didn't know what year 3 was when that first came out. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I had to go back and get the year 2, which was pricey. Again, all the stuff shot up and whatnot. Then I understood like why Bruce Wayne does what he does. I understand why Peter Parker, like no matter how much Peter Parker gets his ass handed to him or gets fucked up beyond all recognition, that dude is going to push forward and do the right thing, right? And that was really important. Wolverine at the time was the Claremont Byrne run, I think. That was awesome. I mean, I jumped into that book maybe before issue 10, around issue 10, because I remember the issue 10 being a big deal, him and Sabretooth, and I didn't have issue 1, it was already up in price, I couldn't get it at the time, but I realized that was a thing. Now again, I'm getting from newsstands, spiral shitty wire racks, and whenever I can go to a comic shop or any place I could find them, like that was the headache. It was just trying to find them. They existed again. It's just seeking them out. Like that became emphasized at some point in time. What helped me is that I didn't realize. So by the time I was starting to read 10 books on a consistent basis, which took a few years, and reading books, then I decided I really liked nonfiction. So history books and biographies became a focal point for me. So if you're thinking I'm talking on my ass, I'm not. I've been reading about this shit for years, right? And then eventually somebody put into context in why comic books got a bad rap. And at some point in time, during a larger whitewashing, the Red Scare, fucking Joseph McCarthy and all that crazy shit created a House of American Activities. And their goal was to put everything under a deep fucking microscope to weed out shit. Because why? Underground ideals, right? We, as Americans, love things. We like pushing the envelopes and developing new ideas. We're creative agents, right? And the hoity-toity people that thought they were better than us decided we are criminal for liking this stuff. Remember R&B records used to be called race records, right? Just put it into context. Proto rock, same shit. And they deeply focused on that. So the negativity that came from comic books came from the House of Un-American Activities. There's a great documentary that covers the larger structure. The Famous Funnies was the very first book. And William Gaines' dad was running the company at the time. He ended up putting together the EC Comics at some point in time. And he actually challenged these people, right? This is the funny thing about it. I mean, you could be morally bankrupt and do a crazy-ass book. But sometimes even the morally bankrupt people are kind of like looking at things critically. So there is probably a meaning to what they're doing and why to what they're doing. There's also people that want to tell dynamic stories to challenge things, to make us better as people, right? Even if it's in the context of hard-nosed, hard-boiled detective stories or mayhem and murder, like people are doing horrible shit in the world, but sometimes you need to put context into them, right? So he challenged the House of Un-American Activities. Eventually, Comic Code was invented, and eventually underground comics in the 60s became a thing. Comics, C-O-M-I-X. You know, you had Spain, which is a great documentary on Tubi about him. You had a few people. Robert Crumb would be one of them. Spiegelman would be another one. There's a documentary on him that came out this year, too. So you have a lot of these books that showed up to challenge things. The underground, you know, and then in the 80s, that stigma still stuck around. Like, so adults would be looking at you, reading these books, and just thinking there's something wrong with you. Like you were broken or something. And at first, it wasn't verbally said. It was just the attitude you would get. And then the attitude parents would give their kids for wanting this. Because understand, again, I wouldn't be surprised if the cause and effect for shitty cartoons and shitty television was the push towards comics, right? So by the time I found myself reading 10 titles, I realized I'm juggling 10 books in my head while reading other books, while dealing with other things, researching other things, watching films. So narrative juggling is a thing. It made my mind nimble enough to go, oh, I remember that from that point, I remember that from that point, and then, oh, I remember that like 10 issues ago or 3 issues ago. That's the cause and effect of this situation. So my mind's developing this way to understand this content, which is a hotter medium than television. So that is essentially my argument for him. The one cool thing about comics is, from a creative perspective, and I even group in, because I told you probably before, comic strips are from a different avenue. They developed in newspapers, which is periodical mass communication. Like I've already told you this. Art is from the books themselves, right? So even though Famous Funnies was put together as a comic book and sold separately from the newspaper, right? The medium became more artistic driven, right? So whereas the standard operation for newspaper stuff came from the editors of the newspaper. What's weird is when you go to a bookstore, like any functioning bookstore, illustrators and humorists and comic strips are in a separate aisle than graphic novels, comic books and graphic novels, right? Like manga, hope I'm saying that right, grew out of the comic book structure. Certain stores have them actually separate now. And American comics kind of going by the wayside, mainly because the people that curate those aisles are strange. They don't get the fundamental structures. Like, they don't get like, hey, you should probably have Death in the Family. Hey, you should probably have Batman Year One. Hey, you should probably have like these key books, like Executioner Song, or so on and so forth. These certain collections you should probably have. Why? Because they're always going to fucking sell, because they're great stories, right? You should probably, well, the one thing they do carry is Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman. That ran, 75 issues, I think? And the omnibus for Shade the Changing Man, which is currently, I think the volume 2 is about to come out of it. So the first volume is like 1 through 35. Here's what's cool about that. So I bought that book years ago. I don't have it anymore, but I bought it years ago. I remember reading the first 12 issues, and it is so fucking crazy and chaotic that it took me a couple of reads to kind of wrap my head around it. Now, you're like, well, were you young? How were you able to get that book? Because nobody gave a fuck. That PMRC censorship thing it affected more millennials than it did Gen Xers. Right? We wore the parental advisory shirts as ironic gestures or the big fucking middle finger. Because it was weird. I do know millennials had a hard time buying albums and going to see movies in theaters and getting access to certain things because it was designed for them. I told you, the Great American Whitewash happened. They were kind of buried in it, but they didn't understand that. Now, if you go back to the earlier episodes, the 2 episodes that were heavy as fuck, I told you, I redefined the thing. There's actually a couple of insights for the generations that I kind of thought were funny. So there's one psychological piece that covers millennials, and they come from 75 or 76 to 85. No, I think that's Gen X. Again, I'm going to say this again. Why? The X's come from punk rock shows, kids going to punk rock shows. It's written on their hands. That didn't take place in 65. It's not a thing. It's later on that it takes place, right? So the generation before that, even though they by normal standard, if you look it up right now, it's considered Generation X from 65 to 80. I hate to beg to differ, but 65 to 74, 73, 74, a different beast. They don't have the full decline. Xers had the full decline. The imploding of the house, the fucked upness of the education system, the change of the guard. We watched that happen. So we fought with a lot of artists and rebelled against the idea of you holding us back, essentially. And what's weird is they were doing that, but they didn't think they were doing it. That's what makes it funny. Like the Tipper Gores of the fucking world thought they were like, oh, our children, whatever. We adapt. We're elastic. We understand the context. We make the decisions to do or don't do. We fuck around and find out. That's what happens. So a lot of us disappeared. So here's what's funny. So I'm a little ahead of the curve when I'm reading comics because I didn't realize what happened. The Green Hornet came out, all these like cool fucking things. And all of a sudden out of nowhere, there is a push. A lot of kids are circulating in these shops, and more of these shops open up. Now, there was another comic book shop in Fall River itself, well, Comics and Stories on Eastern Avenue, I think it was called. And that was another place that existed. I wasn't even aware fully, because understand, like, oh, that says comics right there. Let me go check that out. So there was different places. There's one that started in the Hob Mall at times, which doesn't exist anymore. And eventually that ended up in the South Main place and so on and so forth. The lack of support of these places is the reason why they faded out. And at least in that area. And on the coast, the economy getting fucked every 5 seconds because the game is rigged against us. And factories leaving and all that shit. This hard fucking downturn makes the disposable cash areas, like the comic book shops, record shops, more in risk. Same thing with restaurants, right? Because restaurants are good measurements of economy, right? Remember I mentioned in the first half that economists can't predict. That's insane, right? But restaurants are good measurements. Why? Because if people have some disposable cash, they'll go to restaurants, right? And you can tell if things are going well based on how much tips people are getting. Now, I'm going to tell you, Tip your waiter, your wait staff. Oh, shouldn't even be saying waiter, waitress. That's not even a fucking thing, really. Your wait staff. Tip them in cash. Don't be a fucking asshole, right? So that's a thing. That's a very important thing. These other shops are very important too. So when, like, the movie theater in the city I grew up in was in threat. It was falling the fuck apart, but when it was in threat, that was problematic too, right? So the importance I think I see in comics is all literacy stuff. You're now teaching your kids a lot of values because those are instilled in the comics, even in the most fucked up ways. Like you're meeting the absolute evil while absolute good exists, and in between, right? You're understanding, you're getting a better literacy rate, emotional structure, you're able to juggle around various narratives, critical thinking skills are increasing. That's very important, right? Not only that, you also get an appreciation for the written word and for art. So when adults, and I'm telling you, I cannot express this to you anymore, even till today, depending on how it is, if you read comic books as a grown-ass man today, you're looked at as like there's something wrong with you. You can have a vast library of all the classic literature or theory books, right? But if you have a comic book, all of a sudden you're a fucking weirdo. And a lot of that has to do with the House of American Activities and the hard propagation of how much this is a problem. Underground comics, I implore you, yes, you, the general audience, to doodle. Make as many as you possibly can, put them on, reinvent the Tijuana fucking Bibles, which is fucking usually pornography, but fuck that. Just do these short things. Do as much communicating of ideas out there because narration is important and being able to communicate yourself in many ways helps. Comic books help me find a voice. A lot of my time during that period, incubation stage, the first stage of me developing my narrative point of view in the world, it helped. It wasn't a defining thing, but it helped, right? It helped me put words to ideas. It helped me look at things differently. And again, it gave me a great appreciation for art. Because I understand art was bubbling around that time. Like hip hop and punk rock, more hip hop than punk rock, showed a bunch of different types of graffiti, wall writers and everything else, right? That was now being introduced to me. And I'm like, this is fucking awesome. We can like color the world, change everything, right? It inspired, right? And that is my strong argument for that. That if you're sitting here listening to this and you're going, oh, fuck that, these work with the fucking Satan, right? Whatever the hell nonsense you're saying to communicate the opposite of what I'm suggesting to you, then what's going on with you? Right? Right now, right? You go to local shops. Always support your local shops, right? Even during dire times. You got a few bucks, throw them the few bucks. There's a great comic book. I already told you, Exquisite Corpses has been running, I think issue 10 or 11 is about to come out. Absolute Batman, which is the darkest Batman. Like the situations in both these books are dire, but there is still opposition. There are still heroes to be found to fight the madness. We live in a world that's looking more and more like madness. The ideas they're throwing around right now are absolutely fucking insane. But all I can do is talk to functionalist fucking relatives and fucking friends and have them say, oh no, you don't understand, little man. Things are like, no, you're missing the point. This is by design. And they still don't get it. You can draw it on paper, do paper maches. Tell this to them many times over, and it still doesn't fucking click. But I can tell you right now, if you like this idea, Go read comics. Right? Pick up a magazine. Again, I'm promoting it, but I have nothing to do with them. The Atlantic, current issue Atlantic is covering AI. And it's fucked up. And it's honestly fucked up. And that's it for me. Again, Absolute Batman is strong. It's a strong title. DCKO is weird. And the reason why is it's doing the money thing where they bring you over a bunch of different issues. But if you don't really know what it's about, then I would wait for the collection because that's a hard situation. Storm, X-Men, Aurora, Monroe. That book is really good. Now, the only problem I have with it is that for some reason, instead of going with the numerical issue, they decided to relaunch it this past week as issue 1, even though you have to know the last, 13, 14 issues, maybe even 12, maybe something like that. Well, great. They were just really strong storytelling, strong narrative. She finally fills a lot of the potential. Eternity, blesses her with powers beyond the fold. And what's strange is the story continues over to this current one, but they decided to relaunch it as one. The biggest fucking circus, I guess, from growing up back in the day is like when you went to go read Batman, you're like, I'm reading like issue 570, and then you have to figure out, a longitude and latitude, right? Because you had to figure out, okay, how far do I need to go back to understand the full context of the story? And what's great about the old comic books is they used to know, go back to this issue. For some reason, I know when Disney got a hold of it, they just keep relaunching issue once. Like, Gail Simone just wrote, I want to say it was Uncanny X-Men? I could be wrong with that. It was either X-Men or Uncanny. She's a great writer. I think she's about to do Spawn, too. I've read Spawn for years. Anyway, both stories, like one book was coming out every other week, and then the opposite book was going, so the scattered team, and they were great stories. Things were going really, really fucking well by design, right? And they decided to 86 other books really fast, rather than giving it time and trying to see if they could reinvent it and make it interesting, right? And that's what they used to do back in the day, but for some reason they're not like that right now. So they did this large crossover that I had no fucking interest in. And it bogarted the books. And I guess enough people bitched about it that they went back to numbering them normally. Because it's weird. Because you did that, you lost me. Right? And I'm going to go give you a milestone, and then from that point on, I'm not going to be interested. And what's going to happen is their sales are going to decline. And then all of a sudden, they're going to go, hey, we need to relaunch this book. Here's a fresh issue 1. Don't fucking need that. Just keep going. Course correct. Get a good team in there. And the book will be talked about enough. Readers will talk to other readers about the book. Another benefit for comic books is the subculture of comic books. Because there's a few different ones. The subculture for comic books helps you network with people really well. It messed my kids up initially when I would go into stores and they would be like, oh shit, like this guy's engaging you in a full conversation about shit, right? Then I realized, my ass is old when I'm talking to millennials and I'm referencing the 2-run fucking Joker story from back in the day. Like it was issue 415 of Batman and, what was it, 415? Was it Batman and Detective? Or was it all but just Batman? When the guy ended up acting as if he wanted to be the Joker, like he was imitating the Joker, and the Joker was not happy about it. Great story, right? There's a lot of there's a great Joker story in Shadow of the Bat from issue, I think it's like 38 or 39. It's a 2-part story. It's about him doing the comedian thing and flashbacks and modern times. It's a great little piece. Actually, Shadow of the Bat was great because Alan Grant, I think, wrote the whole 85 or 90 issue run. And he was one of the prolific Batman writers from back in the day. He's dead now, unfortunately. Pretty sure it was Alan Grant that passed away. I should probably check that up. I'll get back to you next episode about that. But yeah, one of the most. I'm pretty sure it was him that died. It's strange because he ran like the bulk of. Like, I went from one writer to another writer to him, and I'm like, this guy's fucking running like with his book, and it's good because you're able to see the world being built relatively well. Again, I know I'm geeking out on air. You're like, oh, Jesus Christ, it's almost 2 hours. What the fuck, dude? Shut the fuck up and drop the episode. All right. So, the last important thing, I mentioned it, and I think that I should bring that up. Subcultures are what unite Americans. It's not fucking sexism, fucking racism, and all the crazy shit you have. It literally is subcultures. It's a harder bond than sometimes family bonds and friends bonds. I shit you not. Like, if you're into music and you show up at a consistent music shop, you're going to develop friendships relatively quick. If you're at comic book shops, you're going to develop friendships really quick. If you're in art areas or in coffee shops, you'll develop rapport relatively quick because there's certain things that will bond everybody together. They'll find the commonalities, right? Why? Because people want that. It's more authentic. It's a better way of living. Rather than, oh, let's watch the game. Yeah, not everybody just wants to watch the game. Sorry. The whole sports industry cries right now. Like, why are you telling them that? Why are you giving it all away? Because there's different glues at different points in time for sports, right? I didn't jump on the last glue thing. I didn't get that bored in my late 20s. Sorry. So anyway, take it slow. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Give me the feedback either on Spotify or YouTube in regards to season 4. Take it slow. Bye.